Let's take a look at the poll question for this session. Indian leadership talent found acceptance in America because of Rajat Gupta's achievements. Do you agree, or would you disagree, or you can't really say? We would love to hear from you. To please be a part of this poll. The poll question for this session being, is Indian leadership talent found acceptance in America because of Rajat Gupta's achievements? And we're all set to start with the fireside chat. Ladies and gentlemen, in this session we shall have conversation with Mr. Rajat Gupta, who's a management expert, author and former managing director, McKinsey and Company, in conversation with Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, co-chairman, 5th National Leadership Conclave and chairman, the Hero Enterprise. They are due to join us shortly. Please remain seated as we are starting right away with the next session. And meanwhile, for those of you who have not taken a look at the poll question, please do so now. It's on your screens. Has Indian leadership talent found acceptance in America because of Rajat Gupta's achievements? Please scan the QR code, which has been printed on your badges. And please follow AIMA's social media channels to stay updated with all AIMA happenings and management updates. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just got ready to receive in our midst Mr. Rajat Gupta and Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal. So please join me in welcoming them on stage with a huge round of applause. Mr. Rajat Gupta, management expert, author and former managing director, McKinsey and Company, in conversation with Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal, who's the co-chairman of 5th National Leadership Conclave and chairman of the Hero Enterprise. A warm welcome to you both. May I request Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal to conduct the session. It's over to you, sir.
Thank you. So after a heated session on politics and elections and politicians, we thought we should talk a little bit about individuals, professionals, professions, and life. I have with me one of the most outstanding individual Indian management thinkers. Rajat Gupta is a well-known name and a face, both in India and worldwide. You know, George Bernard Shaw had once said, life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself. I believe Rajat has, in many ways, created and recreated himself and also found himself. This is an individual with a tough childhood, brought up not by his parents, because he lost his parents young, went out and did them proud by demonstrating the best in education. A very successful education both at IIT and then at Harvard. Once he became a leader, he was, by the way, really the torchbearer of Indian professionals. First Indian to become the head of a global multinational. So in many ways, Rajat, you actually opened the door for many, many Indians who followed since then. You also did something interesting. Not many Indians who've gone out and built a career overseas or in global organizations have come back and done the kind of things you did for India. Your role in nation building here was quite unique. Setting up the Indian School of Business, which you know has become amongst the world's leading business schools. In a survey done only a few months ago, it was ranked as the 5th most desirable business school by applicants worldwide. It is also the only school to rank in the top 25 in the world. There are many, many accolades to what ISB has done. ISB has done more research in its 17 or 18 years than all of the IIMs put together in the 65 years. The second interesting initiative that you had started was the Public Health Foundation of India. Again, an area which is sorely required by India to look at initiatives in public health. You did a lot of work with ministers, prime ministers, state ministers, and chief ministers, advising them on a lot of the policy issue. I remember what was done in Andhra Pradesh in the old days, as also with Dr. Manmohan Singh in multiple initiatives that you had taken on, including looking at the rural economy and agriculture, in addition to the process of how governments are run. You also had, I would imagine in many ways, the only word I can use is a cathartic experience. You're running with the authorities, and then getting convicted and jailed, and then coming out and writing this book. I thought it was a wonderful title, by the way, Mind Without Fear. It would be helpful, Rajat, if you walk us a little bit through what drives you. You've done these amazing things in your life. You had adversity, which is of the kind very few of us have seen. What drives you every morning when you get up? How are you able to get on and do the next thing for yourselves?
Well, first...
And I'm going to come back to some other questions later on.
I'm sure. First, it's a privilege to be here in front of all of you, and it's a privilege to be with Sunil, a person I've worked with for a couple of decades now together. He's very modest by talking about ISB. I can tell you that he is a co-founder of ISB and a moving force behind creating our Mohali campus, which has been extremely successful. So your question is, what drives me? I would have to say one thing that, in my early days, I always very much concentrated on improving myself professionally. When I joined McKinsey, which was the only employer I've ever worked with, I worked there 37 years, it was not about, in a way, McKinsey is a collaborative and competitive place all at the same time. And people keep a lot of scores, when did you get elected partner, when did you do this, et cetera, et cetera. And in contrast, I had no experience before, I didn't know any better. I just thought I should try to become a better and better consultant. And so becoming a better professional was my passion rather than trying to figure out when I would make the next step in the ladder. And so one of the things that I've always felt is this sort of drive, learning mindset, trying to become better at what you do. Another equally interesting force that drives me is that whenever I get very comfortable with something, I've learned that best is to change, to get out of your comfort zone, to do something completely new, challenge. He could make a contribution to society in solving some of the most difficult problems of society. It's much easier to design a strategy for a company A, B, or C. It's much more difficult to figure out how to solve the healthcare crisis in a particular country or society. So another thing that drove me always was issues beyond just business, and how do you make that contribution?
I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on what happened to you when this legal case came up. Your reputation was dragged through the streets, by the way.
Sorry?
Your reputation was dragged through the streets.
Yeah.
But we heard two different views. One which said this system has been unfair to you. You were pointed at because you were who you were, that you were an Indian who had become successful, and all that was going on was considered normal. The other one which said, in your position, you had reached the top, you should have known better. What was actually going on? What was the truth?
So it's a very complex question. Let me try to give you an answer in some different dimensions. The first thing was, the backdrop you have to understand is in 2008, the US went through the worst crisis in a generation. Lots of people lost their jobs, lots of people lost their pensions, their homes. There was an incredible sense of despair, and the financial system was about to collapse. Now, what did the government do, or what did we do? Basically, we rescued the financial system, which was necessary to do. But nobody really held accountable the real perpetrators of that financial crisis, which was the people who over-leveraged, people who gave these loans without any basis for it, people who actually had, bad processes, fraudulent processes. They were trading on their own account. It was sort of a rampant set of practices, which today you would say were really quite improper. Now, what was the response? Basically, we fined these financial institutions, which the shareholders paid most of the fines, and we didn't hold any of the management accountable. In this mode, the public was in a state saying, we need to find who is responsible for this and get somebody. So the prosecution went after hedge funds. Hedge funds didn't cause the financial crisis. They could not hold anybody who actually was responsible accountable. In that context, Rajaratnam was singled out fairly. Even in hedge fund managers, they couldn't get people like Stevie Cohen, who was clearly got away with just paying fines. Now, in all of that, let me start by simply stating, and those of you, and I wish you would have an opportunity to read my book. I'm not an insider trader. I didn't do any insider trading. In insider trading, there are three things you have to satisfy. One is that you actually passed on inside information. Second, that you actually had a quid pro quo and had benefit. And third, that you had criminal intent. There was no proof presented of any of those three elements. There was some circumstantial evidence. You could weave a story, and the prosecutors did a very good job in weaving a story, but it wasn't a true story. And you are basically judged by a jury which really doesn't understand the ins and outs of financial situations.
But you chose not to testify in your own defense.
Yeah.
Do you now regret that?
Yes, I do, and I say that in the book, that I really regret that. I'm not sure that even if I had testified, the outcome would be different. I'm not sure. But I would say that my lawyers didn't do such a good job. They constantly advised me not to testify. I insisted I was going to testify. We, in fact, told the judge I was going to testify. And in the last weekend before I was to testify, the lawyers kept pushing me, saying, I think that's a mistake, you shouldn't testify. And I must say, and I say that in the book, is that I probably succumbed to, I was beaten down by that time, 3 weeks of trial and the government sort of telling stories and stories and lots of untruths. I was quite beaten down about how the trial was going and how the justice system was. And I succumbed to, I can only say fear.
Poor advice.
Yeah, poor advice. And also, I was frozen and I just sort of gave up in a way. And I titled the book Mind Without Fear for many reasons. One of them is that, of course, it's an aspiration that we all should have, and I have it. But at that moment, I think I succumbed to fear.
So I want to go to another dimension of your life. You have been amongst the most successful professionals the world has seen in a while. There are lots of entrepreneurs, professionals, managers in this room. Give us 2 or 3 tips you think are useful, because there are lots of young people here as well. Give us a few tips you think which are useful as people build their careers, must do and must not do.
Well, firstly, different people have different styles of leadership and how they manage their own professional development. But I would say that I already mentioned 1 or 2, really focusing on professional development, not staying too long in your comfort zone, those types of things actually lead to your professional and career development. Another thing I have found myself was that it is far more effective if you work in a team and if you make other people successful. No matter how brilliant you are, how good you are, if you think, I am going to be the person who is going to, through my skills and my brilliance, going to be extremely successful in creating institutions, making a long-term impact on institutions or society, you're wrong. You have to build a team. You have to build other people successful. And they, in turn, will make you far more successful than you ever dreamt of. So I think that's a management philosophy that I think you should. The other thing comes back to sort of the classic, which is our tradition of a karma yogi. Just focus on doing the right thing. Doing the right thing with the right intentions, with the best that you can offer, do the best you can, and don't worry about the results. The outcomes, the unattachment to outcomes frees you to do a lot of things. And you don't worry about whether it's successful or not, because in the end, over a long period of time, basically the results will follow. It may not follow right then, but you have to detach yourself from the results and attach yourself to the effort. It's sort of action with detachment, I would say, is a very good philosophy.
So are you resigned, angry, upset about this period in your life? Has writing the book helped you? Does it bring more peace? Does it raise uncomfortable memories? So how does this phase appear to you now?
So firstly, I would say that I'm not angry. I don't think anger helps anybody. I mean, what does it do if you're angry? It only hurts you. So I think my father used to always say, you can't always control what happens to you, but you can control how you react. So it is very important to react with grace, with humility, with lack of anger. He spent 10 years in and out of jails in the freedom struggle. I never heard him speak one bad word about the British or about his jailers or anybody. Anger is not an emotion that is helpful. My greatest regret of this time period is actually that I had already started spending more than half my time on philanthropic things. There was actually an initiative I started here, which I had to stop in the middle, which was to create an Institute for Urban Development, because I thought one of the biggest issues in the country is uncontrolled, unplanned urbanization, which is going to really come and haunt us. There was more urban poor than urban middle class in most of our large cities. So, you know, it's a journey that was interrupted, and I have great regrets that that happened. But I would also say that I wouldn't be the person I am today without the experience I went through. As they say, in adversity, you learn a lot. And if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. So I feel that this period has been, yeah, good for me.
So what are your plans now? What are you doing nowadays?
Well, I have...
Other than, of course, the book and the book tour, because...
Yeah, the book was, you know, not easy to write. This is the first book I've written, so there's a challenge in writing books, and I don't know how many of you have written books. It's not an easy thing to do. But also it was a particularly difficult topic, because you both write about your life and you write about the difficult times. So it took me some time to do it. I also, after I came out of prison, I spent a lot of time with my family and renewing friendships and so on. But I've started getting involved also back into the passions I had, which is basically education and health. I think those are two areas which are the great equalizers in society. Without education and health, you cannot have human beings realize their full potential. So it is very important. It's a human right to have access to education and access to healthcare. And that's what I really fundamentally believe in and work on. So I've started re-engaging with, you know, institutions like ISB and PHFI, which I founded, but I also have started working on some public health initiatives. In fact, I was in Ahmedabad. Last year, we started a major initiative on maternal and child health. And we have now created it's a population of 300,000 where we have mapped their health status and are trying different interventions to see what really works. A 300,000 population, it will be the largest longitudinal trial of this kind, which is planned to be a 5-year experiment on what interventions work. So back to healthcare and one other passion that I've developed is through this time period, I've seen the underbelly of the US justice system. US has the largest population of incarcerated people, which is over 2.5 million or something like that. There are over 100 million people in the US out of a population of 300 plus, which have been affected by somebody incarcerated in their family and so on. So it's a huge issue. It needs major reform, and I hope to make my small contribution to that.
By the way, the book is available just outside for those of you who are interested. And I don't know if Rajat will have the time to sign in those books if some people are interested.
Unfortunately, probably not, because I have to run to another event after this.
All right. So the big wave that's coming at us right now, like a wall, is technology. Innovation is something that has driven human enterprise right through history, for millennia. And we always used to say the only constant in life is change. The worrying thing now for people is the pace of change itself has changed. It's changed so much that sometimes becomes hard to keep up. And this big debate about whether technology will be the driver, will drive human behavior, or people will still be able to stay on top and use technology as a tool. What is your view on this, and what is your advice on how should people approach technology?
I would say that not only is that question, but the pace of change is such, and the technological advances are so profound in every field, where you have seen the life expectancy double in a century in the world, and it's still going up, and more innovation is to come. So life sciences, extraordinary innovation pace. Communications, electronics, all that. So productivity is also dramatically increased over the years in every field, in agriculture, in industrial work, etc. So all that means is that it takes actually less and less input to produce the same output. It has profound implications on the workforce. It has profound implications of the role of work in life, because so far since the agrarian economy, when you basically worked from sunrise to sundown, and then you worked 8-hour shifts in the industrial world, and in the service sector, etc. It's not clear to me that you need to work 40 hours a week to produce everything that needs to be done, which means that there's going to be an enormous amount of time available, and you have to change the concept of work, and culture and arts and social cohesion and different interests are going to dominate. All that is going to be great unless we don't really take care of climate change and make sure the Earth still survives. I mean, there is a big risk that we'll make ourselves extinct. If you haven't read the book, you should read the book called The Sixth Extinction, which is an interesting book which says that we are in the period of, there have been 5 extinctions before. The last one was the dinosaur, when the meteorite hit. We are going through the 6th, which means we are killing so many species today in the world that it's not clear we will survive unless we do some proactive things.
Right. Before I open to the House for questions, I have just one more. I'm going back to what you said about prison. Now, it'll be interesting and useful for us to hear. What did you do there? I believe you set up something called a breakfast club in there with some of the other inmates, and you were also in solitary for a while. So, are the two experiences quite different? And what did you learn from the inmates who had been there much longer than you? Is that what is driving you to focus on the justice system?
So, let me start by saying those of you who have either read the book or will read the book might come away with the impression that prison is a cakewalk. Well, it really wasn't. It's a very tough experience to go through. But when I was entering prison, I always sort of thought, what am I going to do? First, I went into a low security prison, which means that basically, there are not even any fences. There are boundaries, but no fences, and it's a pretty, it's a Spartan place. You have bunk beds and your area is a little and all that, but you have fair amount of freedom inside the prison to do whatever you wish. And I thought I would enter prison like really a monastery. I thought, this is a time to kind of go and reflect and learn. So I read a lot, I wrote a lot. I also interacted with people I would never come in touch with otherwise in my life. And from that experience came a lot of humility. These people, basically most of them were for drug crimes or other things like that. But the justice system was such, they had draconian sentences, and many of them really should never have been there. They were petty crimes, but they were very inherently quite good people. I documented their cases. I interviewed 40 of them in detail and found out, what had happened to them through the justice system. So that was the first part of my prison experience. There were fun parts in it. I started a breakfast club, a bridge club, a book club, all of that. It was interesting to, lead as sort of you have time on your hands, so basically you engage in many fun activities. But then, for no reason at all, actually very flimsy reasons, I was put in solitary confinement. And solitary confinement is like basically involuntary vipassana. But the conditions were extremely harsh. I mean, to describe to you the cell that you're put in is maybe just where you and I are sitting, a little bit bigger and round here. Every piece of object is made out of steel. So the bed is a steel bunk. The toilet is a steel toilet with no seats or anything. The wash basin is steel. There is a door, a steel door with a little window where they pass the meal to you, like, you know, you're being fed as a zoo animal kind of thing. And it's very, very harsh conditions. So one thing I had an opportunity to do, I had 2 books with me, and I convinced them these are my religious books, you have to let me take them. It's like my Bible. So one was the Bhagavad Gita, which I had never read cover to cover. I had read pieces of it, but never cover to cover, and I read it many times over there. The other one, I was trying to learn or self-learn meditation. So I had a book on, you know, pranayam by Iyengar, which I thought was a wonderful book. So I had these 2, and that saved me a lot in solitary confinement. But to give you an idea, one would think that solitary confinement would be very quiet. You know, nobody to talk to. You're there in your cell by yourself. But it was the noisiest place in prison, because people were there going absolutely crazy. UN defines solitary confinement beyond a week as torture. And people were going crazy. They would bang on doors. They would keep shouting. They would, you know, it was the noisiest place, like a railway station or worse, and banging on the doors and clanking and so on. So it was quite an experience in terms of being there for 7 weeks. I would say that in the US system, they willy-nilly, with the flimsiest of excuses, put you in solitary confinement because they're misaligned incentives. The prison gets paid more if you're in solitary confinement per prisoner than if you're in the normal facility. So basically the incentive of the prison administration is to keep the solitary confinement wing full. You know.
Can we get the mics here for the lady here right at the up front?
My name is Neena Chatrat, and thank you, Rajat, I think, for taking us through a very painful part of your life and emerging out victorious. And I would love to lay my hands on the book and read it. My question to you, you're silent in the conversation on your stint with McKinsey, and you're also silent on the only place that you ever worked, 37 years. How was it like at the end? How did they treat a professional of your stature? And so, how did you leave it behind?
Yeah. Well, I'm not silent in the book. I write about, I haven't said anything. I will answer your question. You know, to start with, I have to say, I owe McKinsey an enormous amount because I am what I am as a professional because of McKinsey. And it is an extraordinary firm. One of a kind. It's a global partnership with a very values-driven firm. So I have the greatest set of admiration for the firm, even today. However, I would say that the way they reacted to my situation was very hurtful to begin with, and I think not consistent with their own values. I'll give you 2 examples. Basically, when it happened, of course, I had already retired from the firm, but I was consulting with them. Throughout my career, if I may say so, this is a little immodest to say, but I was one of the best consultants they had, and I was a great client developer, and they always wanted me after I retired to stay on and help them develop clients, which I did. So when this happened, 2 days before it happened, when I knew that this was going to happen, that they were going to charge me, I called the then head of McKinsey and said, I'm resigning as a consultant to you because this is going to happen in 2 days. And I want you to make sure that you can distance yourself from McKinsey per se. And the charges had absolutely nothing to do with McKinsey. I mean, you know, the clients were not related to McKinsey, nothing was related to McKinsey. So they had nothing particular to worry about. What they did is that they did petty things and big things. They took away my email. When I needed it, I didn't have any, this is the only email I ever had in my life. They took away my office, which is a tradition for former managing directors to have an office and a secretary. That's the time when I needed an office the most. They went around going to clients who knew me, who were good friends of mine, telling them that I have nothing to do with McKinsey. And these same clients would call me back and say, why are these people coming around and telling, we know you're retired, we know, what is it that they're trying to say? They were trying to, I think there was a reaction of fear on part of McKinsey that, you know, this is going to affect us and so on. So, having said that, and you have to remember, they did this when, in my view, they didn't take into account two principles or values they had. One is, you are innocent till you're proven guilty. This was when I was just charged. As far as society should be, it should be innocent till you're proven guilty. Second is, McKinsey prides itself on being a partnership. A partnership means that when your partner is down, you help them, you lift them up, you don't kick them. And I thought that was not right on what they did. And I've said that to them, and, you know, they did what they did.
Mr. Kalra, can you get a mic here, please, right up front?
Thank you, Sunil. Mr. Gupta, first of all, you were an icon, and even after your ordeal by fire, you remain an icon. We're all very proud of the way you have rediscovered self, as Sunil said in the... My question is a short question. Do you think that by convicting you, the US system was getting back at Indians whom they resent to be in the highest places in the US, despite the fact that Preet Bharara...
Just keep the mic close to your mouth. Yeah.
Despite the fact that Preet Bharara is of an Indian origin, who was the prosecutor, but do you think the system, in quotes, was getting back at India on that?
And I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I don't think it had anything to do with my being Indian. I actually think it had to do with the fact that they could not get hold of anybody who was really responsible for the financial crisis. They had to show that they could get somebody. And that, I think, was the more of a driving force than whether I was Indian or not.
So one right at the back, and then here on my right, the gentleman in the blue shirt. I'm going to try and cover as many as possible. About 20 hands have been raised, and we have 16 minutes to go.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Professor Harish Chaudhary. I am from Banaras Indian University. My question is slightly different because in initial year you were associated with the ISB. So can we call you academic leader, successful academic leader number one? And number two, what role should be played by current academic leaders in transforming the Institute of Higher Learning? Like yesterday only NIRF ranking has been given. So can we say the success of institute depend upon the academic leader and what roles they should play? Thank you.
I'm sorry, there was so much echo, I couldn't get the whole question.
Question on academic leadership.
Academic leadership in general. Well, you know, I think the biggest problem, of course, in most academic institutions is faculty. It's not talent. We have wonderful talent, great people, so we've got wonderful students. But faculty is the biggest issue, and finding quality faculty is difficult. We had that experience in ISB, and finally we have, there were two solutions we had on that. One was we had visiting faculty from all over the world. We initially thought that after 1 or 2 years that model won't work, people will get tired. But now year 16 or whatever it is, it's still going, 18, it's still going strong. people love to come and teach at ISB. But one thing I actually regret we didn't do at ISB, but we did in PHFI. So having learned from this faculty issue in ISB, I urged the leadership of PHFI. I said, let's manufacture our own.
I just want to tell them what PHFI is.
It's the Public Health Foundation of India, which actually does work in public health, does research in public health, policy work, and trains people, masters in public health, masters in immunology, masters in hospital management, and so on. So what we did is we said, let's sponsor PhDs all around the world. So we would hire undergraduates or master's people who were interested in doing their PhDs. We would fund them for a doctoral program all around the world. And they had to sign to, and we'd pay for that, and they had to sign to serve 5 years back in PHFI. And we said, if in 5 years we can't convince them to stay on, then it's our fault, but at least 5 years they should serve. Within 5 years, in PHFI, we developed 800 researchers and faculty members. It was the largest talent pool of public health professionals in the country, and in fact, in probably the entire region. So faculty remains the biggest problem. We have to develop them. We have to manufacture our own. We have to train them. I'm not sure I answered your question, but that's how I feel about faculty development.
The mic here, please. That's a gentleman in the blue shirt, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Manjul. In the beginning of court proceedings in US, normally enchanted God save Honorable Supreme Court. Did you think they are honest to God or judicial system of America in your trial? And my second question, did you overcome the trauma of insider trading imposed on you by US authority? And what's your advice to others supposed to face the same music? Thank you.
I mean, you asked a question about the judicial system. I mean, the judicial system is fine, but there are many issues with the judicial system. First one is prosecutorial overreach. The prosecutors in US have unchecked powers, and they are typically political animals. They're politically ambitious. Generally, the path is you become a prosecutor and then become a politician. So there are a lot of them who use that unchecked power. They're all about winning, not about going after the truth. They are not beyond using tactics which you would otherwise find very unsavory. For example, trying people in public, leaking information, arm twisting potential witnesses, all of that, plea bargaining, which is basically threatening you with a long sentence and saying if you plead guilty, we'll have a reduced sentence. All of these are big issues in the US judicial system. You'll have to read the book to say how I reacted to it and how I came out of it. I feel that I was a political prisoner of the times. I feel it was my destiny to go through that, and I feel I've come out of it fine. I mean, I'm here.
Can we get the mic here, please? And the next one this side.
Thank you, sir. My name is Rajiv Khurana. We feel really sad for the ordeal that you've gone through. But, sir, if you were now to be retained by the Indian government and reform the Indian prison systems, because in many countries we call it as a correction services, what would be your top recommendations for India?
Well, I think they're common everywhere. I don't know the prison system well here, but in general, I would say that the first task of society is actually to have a prison experience, which of course is to begin with a punishment, but its objective also should be how do the prisoners come out and reintegrate into society in an effective manner, which means that they have to be trained, given opportunities, taught new skills, and given a support structure. When they come out, they become productive members of society. The recidivism rate in the US is 65%. That is, when 65% of the people who come out of prison go right back into prison because the opportunities are not there, the training is not there, and the environment is not there. I don't know the Indian system, but I would say that, that should be a paramount goal. The other is human dignity. They treat prisoners, as they say, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The prison guards think they have absolute power over you, and they basically treat you that way. That's not what it should be. Human dignity anywhere, even in prison, is important.
Yes, please.
Sir, good evening. This is really a matter of great privilege for me that I listened to you on 3rd of April at ISB and the book launch, and today here. So it's my privilege. Sir, you talk a lot about Bhagavad Gita at ISB campus also, and today most of your part was based on the Bhagavad Gita. But sir, I want to ask you, why these B schools and other schools are not having any subject based on the Indian Gita and Veds? Those are the best management practices.
Well, I only have to agree with you in some principles that come out of it. Everybody, when I read it, I found certain parts of it kind of discordant. It doesn't fit with modern society. They talk about, the caste system and a bunch of things that I thought was strange in the Gita. But the basic principles of, for example, I talked about Karma Yoga. Another one which is puts perspective in life is talking about the everlasting soul and what is inside you and the power of that. And it puts everything in perspective for, your soul is eternal, and all this that happens to you is just some kind of maya as you go through. So Karma Yoga, another idea that is very around in Gita a lot is detachment, which is don't get attached too hard to your material things, your relationships, your careers, or anything. Action with detachment is a very important idea. The last one I picked up is equanimity. In life you go through ups and downs and sorrows and happiness. They're actually all the same. Life is a series of experiences, and you will learn from every one of them, whether they're happy or sad or whatever. And if you can be equanimous through that whole process, then you have achieved inner peace. And that's critical.
Get one here to the gentleman in front, and if there's time, then we'll get you, because we have only 6 minutes to go. So if you can, both the question and the answer can be short, we'll try and get 2 in.
I have a question to both of you, actually. Globalization has finally produced a Trump who's disrupting the world side by side with trends of reversal of globalization. So there are very good signs of it. What is the steady state the world economy is going to be able to achieve 10 to 20 years from now?
You first, Sunil.
So I think this is a temporary reversal. What we're seeing actually is not just the US. Around the world, you're seeing an interesting phenomena. The rise of the extreme right, anger, distress, and despair amongst population, people at large, political leaders playing to that distress. So you're also seeing the age of the alpha male, US, China, Manila, Philippines, Turkey. So country after country, you have these leaders who also want to position themselves for life. So it has 2 implications. One is those countries who have got a good set of building blocks already their growth is reasonably assured right now. On globalization, I think reversing globalization is a very poor idea. It's the very champions of globalization, by the way, who are putting up some of the biggest barriers right now. I said this in an earlier session, that I don't think you can stop information, knowledge, and digital information and data through political lines or policies. It will cross over. So globalization is here to stay. This is, I hope, a minor blip. But the overall economy currently worldwide is going through a very, very strange time, except an economy like US, and India is like an island, by the way. Most other economies are under stress, and they still need a few years to play out the reasons where the stress has come from. But in the medium to long term, I think we are in good shape. Especially in India, we're in very good shape.
I want to bring a slightly different angle to it. I think the fundamental problem that society is seeing today is income inequality. It is growing dramatically in every society. That's at the root cause.
It's the source of the distress.
Of what is happening.
Yeah.
And the other thing is not only income inequality in a particular society or a country, it's also massive inequality of opportunity of income between countries. You see human migration as a result of that, which is, you see that in Europe when you're surrounded, when you have 40,000 a year GDP per person, and you have, 1/20th of that, and hundreds of millions of people surrounding that, you will have social unrest. I think one of the things that one can watch for here in this country is also growing inequality, and unless we provide, see, capitalism, we haven't found a better system, but capitalism needs a social safety net. It needs universal access to some fundamental rights, along with the incentives that capitalism provides. And if we don't look after those and create a level playing field, you're going to have the kind of reaction we have.
So I have to apologize to all of you who has raised hands, there are many, many of them. We have run out of time. I just want to thank Rajat for a wonderful session, and thank you all for being a wonderful audience. This has been not just an interesting, it's been a little bit of an unusual set of sessions in the National Leadership Conclave for AIMA, and it's been truly an outstanding experience. Thank you very much, Rajat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Munjal. Thank you, Mr. Gupta. May I request Mr. Munjal to kindly present a memento to Mr. Rajat Gupta as a token of our appreciation and thanks. Thank you once again, Mr. Munjal. Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Well, ladies and gentlemen, AIMA believes in the principle of recycle and reuse. All the delegates are requested to please drop their name tags and agenda at the registration counter or in the designated boxes.
Just a moment, please. Just one moment.
I just want to say to you that if you have the opportunity, do read the book. It's an interesting read. But I also have narrated an audio book. I read the book myself. It's available in an electronic version. And the reason I say that is a friend of mine just wrote me an email this morning. He said he listened to the book in 20 hours straight. And he said it was like I was speaking to the person. And he enjoyed it. So it takes more time. But if you have the time, please do. You'll enjoy it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, going back, AIMA believes in the principle of recycle and reuse. All delegates are requested to drop their name tags and agendas at the registration counter or in the designated box.